All right. Hello, welcome everybody to the weekly SIG Docs meeting. I'm Jim Angel, one of your co-chairs for SIG Docs. It is November 10th, 2020. And it's the first meeting we've had in 2 weeks or so because there was a meeting that was canceled, as well as for the US election, we had the November 3rd meeting canceled. So it's good to see everybody again and get back in a somewhat regular cadence, although next week is KubeCon. So there's one thing to discuss here, and I'll add that to the agenda. But I know for the KubeCon in EU, we ended up making it more of a social hour rather than an official SIG Docs meeting with an agenda. More, if you need time to go to KubeCon, attend events, you're not missing out. Otherwise, we did a social. We'll talk about that in a second. So are there any new contributors joining us? It looks like all familiar faces. Yep, I see a lot of familiar folks. Welcome back, everybody. No new contributors, but good to see some friendly faces. And for updates and reminders, this week's PR Wrangler is myself. And to be completely honest and transparent with everyone else call, I haven't been doing a great wrangling job, but expect to see some noise and chatter from me later on tonight and throughout the week as I get into full gear as the PR Wrangler. And next week's Wrangler is KubeCon, so big question mark, but I do see that Tim Bannister might chip in, which would be much appreciated. And approvers, make sure you know your scheduled PR Wrangler shifts. That is in the agenda as well if you need it. So jumping straight to the agenda, and I started chatting about this a little bit. I like the idea, wanted to bring it up with the group. And that is for KubeCon, since a lot of folks are attending events, they're watching videos, they're hosting their own different sessions. It worked out really well for KubeCon EU to switch this meeting to be opt-in only, basically a social hangout. If you want to join, you can. If not, you're not missing out on an official meeting. Are folks okay with us doing that again next week? Do they have any other suggestions of what they would like to do? Any thoughts on that?
That sounds like a really good idea.
Can we get the KubeCon account or the Kubernetes IO account to promote that we're just here to hang? Like, let's send out some tweets, man. Yeah, man, let's send out some tweets. Let's get some friends.
And if I recall correctly, for the EU one, there is a CNCF like social hour hangout channel and their Slack, and I believe Tim boosted the meeting there, saying, "Hey, if you want to hang out, learn about SIG Docs," and that was awesome.
Yeah, I think they're planning to do happy hours on Twitch this time around, but like either way, I would reach out to people who have Twitter access and.
Cool. Yeah, strong +1 to that. Anyone not want to do a social and they want to do an official SIG Docs meeting and get straight to work? Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I think it really alleviates the burden or pressure on a lot of busy folks here in the community. So strong +1, and we'll roll forward with that. All right, so up next is the release 120. I did update some notes from what I've heard from Jeremy Rickard about the current status of the release. So for those who don't know, the tentative release date is December 8th. And right now we're looking at, with KubeCon, with the US Thanksgiving holiday, and a lot of things coming up, the December 8th deadline and the amount of PRs that need to be merged and approved and reviewed is quite daunting. It sounds like there might be a call out for hands on deck, need help reviewing PRs and getting those merged. But Anna or anyone from the Docs release team want to add to that and give a little more context?
Yeah, so a few meetings ago, we actually had a discussion about whether we should extend the docs deadline, but they actually came back and said no, because if that happens, then release would get extended, and then every release is already on December 8th. And if you go beyond December 8th, everyone's in a holiday mode and it's not gonna get done. So that's the response that we got from the SIG release team. So pretty much if you look at the timeline, like we are like, I'm not sure how we're gonna do this because there is 58 enhancements and they're all being tracked right now, but the code freeze is this Thursday. So I'm hoping, because by looking at all the docs PR that's currently we're tracking, everything's on hold except maybe like 3 that I mentioned yesterday, because the KK PRs have not been merged in. So I'm hoping that after a lot of enhancements will make it to the code phrase that will, lighten our load. Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is that there are draft PRs for draft features. The features aren't in, but the documentation is not finished for quite a few PRs as well. Nothing wrong with finishing your documentation whilst the code is being reviewed. And I really encourage it rather than doing those in series.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just also looking at the statuses of these 2 pages worth of PRs, which is terrifying. And there's a lot of things that are on hold, but just haven't received a looks good to me / an approve yet. Do you want us to kind of swarm and on the things that aren't works in progress, start dropping looks goods in? Is that what you're hoping for?
So they're not ready, like Tim said. A lot of them are not ready to be reviewed. And everything that has a hold is that their KKPRs are not merged in. So I actually check those like every day, try to remove holds if I can, but I haven't been able to remove a lot of them. So I don't know what the plan is, because after code freeze, then we have KubeCon, and then after KubeCon, we have our deadline for docs, which is on November 23rd is the docs deadline, where they need to get it reviewed. They need to have it in a state where it's ready to be reviewed by 23rd. So, but my concern is because KubeCon, not everyone's gonna be doing that, right? So we're gonna have a bunch of like drop PRs. And then after a week, that's when all the PRs needs to be merged in. So like the final deadline for docs is November 30th.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, does SIG Docs in general have that capacity during those weeks, even like, to review in just such a short time?
I will
Yes.
make that capacity for you, but
For my general understanding, so these enhancements to 58 that are not merged into KK, they should or absolutely have to be merged before Thursday. Otherwise, they're not making the release. Is that correct understanding of code freeze?
They can still make an exception.
Yeah.
So,
And
sorry, go
Jim,
ahead, Jurgen.
so if let's say I saw there is a lot of PRs that actually is still in the draft mode, then should we start reviewing that or no? Because it's kind of confusing when the status is still draft, as in GitHub draft, not like ready to be reviewed.
Go ahead, Tim.
My approach and also my recommendation to people is that if someone has marked their thing as work in progress by any of the mechanisms, then the kind of help that we can give is pointing out obvious mistakes. If someone has deleted a heading that has to be retained, tell them that. If someone hasn't updated the feature gates and they'll need to do that, tell them that. But otherwise, leave them to it. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh, and by the way, I've given you, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I've given you some essential feedback and here are some other suggestions that are up to you to take. But it's, we're not worried about the minor details. We're looking at giving people help on finishing their PR and getting it ready for review.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is really useful to tell people about essential things like you need to document your feature gates. That's not automatic.
And I would add to that as well. And I agree that we can definitely move in that direction. But I think also there's nothing wrong with a little bit of nagging. So if we see a PR that's been in the draft mode or it's been work in progress for over a week, 2 weeks, whatever we think is a reasonable amount of time, I think a week is more than reasonable enough to say, hey, look, there's been no status change in over a week. Any updates, any progress? I think poking in that sense, I know a lot of folks get a lot of pings and reminders on GitHub, and I don't think one more is going to hurt. And if anything, it might, draw attention to the fact we're needing attention to this issue.
Okay, so then maybe then our team can go through the docs PR and ping them about, filling out their content while their KKPR is in progress. So we can start reviewing them. We can do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I added that to the agenda just for tracking. But yeah, that sounds great. If the docs team wants to take a look at that, I feel like with the code freeze on Thursday, we should have a better idea of what's getting in or not, even with exceptions, hopefully. If every enhancement's an exception, I feel like there's a bigger problem that's not a docs related problem, But yeah, I think for managing the docs release process, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to the SIG Docs group. I know there's the release channel itself. I see a lot of great communication going on there. Feel free to copy any of those messages and post them and boost for visibility on the SIG Docs channel. I consider this to be all hands on deck. We can help out any way we can. Boost it, raise visibility as much as you possibly can, and feel free to ping people, DM them on Slack, reach out to them on GitHub. Definitely get the information and progress that you need as you need it. One thing that was shared with me during the release process is Docs as a sub-release project or a sub-release group does have the power to potentially block or prevent enhancements from making the Kubernetes release. It also has the ability to dictate when that release comes out, some of those deadlines. Historically, we haven't had to enact on those, quote unquote powers, but just know that it's not like we're going to get steamrolled by the KK community doing what they do and just not doing docs straight up. Docs are an important piece of the Kubernetes release, and we want to make sure that we have the leverage and mechanisms we need to get the docs in place for the release successfully. And if things that we're doing today aren't working, we need to raise those alarms and make those changes.
And sorry. Well, I just want to add one more thing to it. So out of those 50, at least half of them might need a tech review in addition to the docs review to verify. So I would suggest that we could start asking the SIGs, and if the release leads could help, and if you need any help from the release leads team, please give a shout out or reach out. We'll be happy to help in any way. But that has been a huge blocker, at least in the last release, that the things would be reviewed from the SIG Docs' perspective and side, and they would have an LGTM, but the tech review would take a while because it's very hard to get hold of those folks. They are always busy. Whoever is going to review, they already have so many enhancements. They are reviewing the code, and they also need to review the docs. So you might want to plan a little bit for that.
Yeah, I would definitely +1 to that as well. And I know there's not one blanket statement when it comes to technical review, but if there are any docs out there that we're looking at the content and we don't think we have the ability to give a proper technical review, finding those reviewers early rather than later might help. This is a really general statement, but occasionally I've seen PRs come in for the release or enhancements where grammatically and content-wise, they look good to me, and what they're saying sounds good. Maybe it's about certificates or about other nuances of Kubernetes where I'm like, this feels right, but I'm just not 100% sure this is entirely accurate. I've had success too, just DMing folks on Slack or poking people who are related to the PR saying, hey, look, just you don't even need to do a docs review on this. Just is this information genuinely accurate, and we can actually merge it in for the release. And getting a thumbs up there would be great. I know I dealt with that a lot when it came to like advanced storage mechanisms, things changing and graduating where, yeah, this sounds good, but let me just make sure someone in storage says, yeah, this is going in the release and we can make sure this is valid. And that helped out a ton, but absolutely the tech review can be a little bit of a slowdown for sure.
I wonder if a suggestion for SIG release, and sorry, there's like a lot of background noise in my life right now. I wonder if a suggestion for SIG release to take to the retro is, do we need to start effectively assigning a point person from each SIG to do tech reviews? Because this always seems to be a problem where we're constantly chasing tech reviews, and it's a problem for technical writers in general. And just saying that as a part of the release process, if you're submitting an enhancement, you also have to submit the person who is going to do the tech review on the docs. And it cannot be the same person.
Sorry, was taking notes, but yeah, I like that idea, and I can write it down in our retro board.
Yeah, no, I'd be strong +1 for that as well. I think it makes sense. We could potentially even include that in the opening template, or, you know, some of the formatting options there to say, all right, you can open your draft PR, you can open up whatever docs you got to open up, you could open up, but then also include in that opening PR message who the tech reviewer is going to be, or that point person.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else about the release? Sounds like we're all hands on deck and ready to help out where we can.
I have like just a few more things. The integration branch is not healthy after one of the PR got merged on, and I don't really see any problems with the logs, but I mean, like, it failed, of course, but like, I think maybe retriggering it would solve it, but I don't have that access. But if you could take a look, I can post
I
it.
retriggered it earlier, Anna.
Oh, you did, and it still failed?
So it wasn't that.
Oh, okay. All right. So I will.
What you can do is
Yeah.
file an issue. I mean, you don't need to, but like, I think if this happens, file an issue to track that it's got a fault, and then post that issue into Slack and sort of highlight that as pulling the andon cord and getting the supervisor to come along the production line. It's summoning help. And in other words, what I would say is, please don't feel you have to wait till the weekly meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, got it. And then another thing, so I know we talked about the automatically applying milestones and hold label during the SIG planning meeting. So I actually created an issue for it because there was a lot of PRs, there was a lot of discussion going on in different different places. So we don't have to talk about it. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that there's an issue there. And there are 2 topics that needs to be discussed, and you can like comment on it, on the issue, unless we want to talk about it here. But I think I already took a bunch of time.
I actually created a point here about that, just so everyone is aware, and about the PR as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to spend some time on it. I mean, really the point of these weekly docs meetings when we're all together here is to solve some of these problems, raise awareness, talk about context. Even if we talk a little bit more about the release, I feel like this is all important content. So yeah, let's cover that a little bit more in depth when Irvi's topic comes up, which it will shortly here. And is that the same issue, Irvi, that you linked in there as well?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, 24960. Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll come back around to that.
Sorry, just one last thing.
Yeah, it's okay.
So SIG Release is working on a receipt process for K8s, and it's actually, so I actually attended the meeting today, and it's gonna start. They're gonna create a K8s for it for the K8s process, and start working on it for the next release. But it's actually gonna affect how the release works, the process. So especially because it's making changes to the tracking sheet for the K8s, which will affect the docs. So I just want to let people know about that project if you haven't seen it. I'm gonna also put a link in the chat. They have like a overall process that they're documenting right now. So if you want to take a look, leave a comment, any comment from SIG Docs would be really appreciated. And I'll keep an eye on it. If there are any progress that needs to be announced here, I will do that. But just FYI there.
Cool. So what's the general like TLDR on the KEPS receipt process that would be important for docs?
So right now, as a SIG Docs, we are using the tracking sheet, right? Like the Google Excel to track all the enhancements for enhancement team and docs team. But they are moving that to Git, basically. So that will, right? So they're gonna track all the KEPs in Git instead of a tracking sheet. So then like the docs team won't have any enhancement to track if their enhancement team is not going to do that. But then they're not gonna just get rid of everything all at once, right? So, but it will be a slow progress, and they don't have an like a idea of how it will affect docs team for the release. So it's just starting out, I guess.
So here's another suggestion. I wonder if the owners of this kept to be need to come and talk to us about it at one of our next meetings. And if maybe we need to like crook that finger and just say, hey, please come talk to us so that we can form an opinion.
Sure, I can relay that message. Sure. I mean, like, I think they're gonna like create a KEP, but I will relay that message. Yeah.
It's gonna be a meta KEP, like a KEP of KEPs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like there's I'm just thinking right now there's a handful of ways to solve that problem. Obviously, we don't need to discuss the options here, but just with the difference of whatever they're going to end up doing or that approach they'll take doesn't mean that the docs can't find a way to easily track docs, update spreadsheets, things of that nature, but definitely can cross that bridge as they get more finalized on what that final Git state looks like, and potentially there's an opportunity for us to collaborate there. Cool. And then real quick, did we say that the VNext staging or the dev branch is building successfully after kicking it back over to Marana?
No.
It is still failing?
Yeah. Tim said that it's still failing. So I'm gonna create an issue.
Okay. Now that is the VNext staging, right? That we're talking about? I'm sorry, I'm poking around in Netlify here trying to understand the problem.
So it's this PR. I don't know if it's actually VNet staging. It might be.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh no, it is. It is the VNext staging. Sorry, it is.
So it looks like at this PR here, the deploy preview worked, but then it's not happy about these top checks. So yeah, either way, I think issue and looking at that would be good, but it looks like the VNext staging branch is building successfully, but those header rules, mixed content, pages change, and redirect rules are failing, which I couldn't tell you why. Cool. All right. Sorry, I got totally distracted there. All right. Moving on. Unless is there anything else around the release? I ought to make sure we covered that.
No, I'm good.
Awesome.
How was
Cool.
that?
All right, so moving on to the blog update. Looks like business as usual. Keep these coming. So I like that. I'm guessing Taylor, that's that's your input. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to see all the different focuses and things like that going on. Obviously, 2020 has been no shortage of just events in general. But I really like reading about the Kubernetes ones, most of all, very biased here. So keep them coming. If you've got good ideas, or if anyone wants to talk about any blog posts they want to write, I'm more than happy to sit down and chat with some people on that front as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And moving on to the updates and PRs. If anyone has any other updates or PRs or issues they want to bring or raise up visibility on, feel free to add them there. The one I added was this enhancements or this KEP that's potentially coming down the pipeline. There's no action needed right now, but I wanted to give some context on what this KEP means and potentially the work that's coming our way in relation to this KEP. So ultimately, I want to say maybe it was a year ago, year and a half or so ago, all of the cloud providers got pulled out of the Kubernetes repository and said your code should belong to your cloud provider's code base and integrate with some sort of interoperable cloud provider in Kubernetes. So what that also meant was when the source code got pulled out of Kubernetes, also the documentation and some of the related pieces there, some of it never existed to begin with. They were all hosted in the Git repos already. I don't know of any massive cloud provider documentation that was taken out of the Kubernetes website, but ultimately this KEP tries to establish a guideline of what documentation looks like for out-of-tree cloud providers. So the fundamental goal of this is, what do all of the cloud providers need to standardize when it comes to documentation? How does their site look? This is not about Kubernetes website. This might at the end of the day be that Kubernetes SIG Docs says, here's a recommended way to deploy to Netlify, or here's the recommended theme or a way to stay synchronized with our web page. It might be a little bit more standardized than what we've seen in the past with different sub projects breaking out. Like I know Kind has its own Netlify page, kubectl has its own Netlify page. We see different sub projects and areas have their own Netlify page with very little oversight from SIG Docs. And I think this is more of talking about standardization, themes, branding, content, general requirements, not entirely related to SIG Docs, but also intersects with SIG Docs. Any questions or comments on that? Cool. Hearing not too much. Really, this is more for awareness. There's no action to be taken. There's really not a huge discussion to be had. Just if we see more activity around this KEP, we see these cloud providers talking about doc standardization. This might come up again. The reason why I'm bringing this up is it has switched from being a proposed KEP to being implementable, I believe. More of an official KEP status, I believe. So there might be some more work coming down the pipelines there, and that's pretty much it. All right, moving on to, I added an action item to talk about the background and demo KREL, CREL. If prepared, I am not prepared to do a demo. We're gonna skip that. Hopefully after KubeCon, I'll be able to throw something together. That was something that came up in our quarterly review. We've talked about using the CREL automation tool for some of the docs release processes. And Karen made the great suggestion that, giving just a general demo or overview of what it is, how it works, some of the components there for folks who aren't tied into the release team would help out a ton. And I completely agree. Just need to put something together, and that'll be coming here in probably 2 weeks or so. And with that, we'll move on to ERV, automation and manual process being merged. And this was related to Anna's issue earlier, if y'all want to take that away.
Yes. So basically, we have some kind of discussions where we eventually decided that we will use test infra tools, Pro 1, and there is several PR that actually been merged. But another follow-up discussion is whether we should add fee prefix to the dev staging as well, because the others, the KK is using prefix fee, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong, Anna.
No, that's right.
Oh, yes. Yeah, basically that. And we need some kind of input, whether it's necessary for us to kind of rename the branch for current release, or we will start it from the next release. And maybe if there's something that you want to bring up, Anna, for this.
No, I think you pretty much covered that, but it's basically other K repos that we have seen prefix it with the V, but website does not. So it's just more like making it consistent across different branches in Kubernetes.
So is that something worth discussing here about that, whether prefixing it or not, or is that just general up for debate? And here's issues for folks to get more context on?
I think we need some kind of feedback. Maybe if you can take a look into the issues, that's what we want to highlight here.
Cool. Yeah, just from a general understanding at a very high level, whether to prefix with a V or not, doesn't matter so much in the sense of how we move forward, whether we do that or not. The most important thing is going to be the documentation around it and the release leads moving forward. So any change that we make to naming branches, strategy, prefixing the V or not labels, how that happens each subsequent release, we have at least 4 other releases that are going to need to essentially deal with this change, as well as the merge is trickled down. And what I mean by that is master at some point becomes a release branch, and that release branch becomes an older release branch. And as we've updated and changed things in the site, there's kind of this trickle down effect of changes that we've made upstream. So I don't really have a strong opinion at the moment, other than it's just a big burden from a knowledge transfer, from a documentation standpoint, and making sure that there's so much documentation out there on the release process as far as the different areas, whether it's on K website, whether it's in the SIG release handbooks, whether it's, in our meeting minutes, in our old YouTube videos, just making sure that we've covered all of our bases and none of the older lingering stuff is out there if we change direction. But whether we change it or not, my general gut says to go with what the majority of the community is doing, but I'd be open for anyone else's feedback or comments. Cool. Not hearing a ton of feedback or comments other than that. I'll take a deeper look at the issues to make sure I'm not completely off base there with what I said. But yeah, I think the emphasis will be on training and material rather than the decision to prefix with a V or not. Cool. Anything else on that issue or anything else that the community can help with as far as moving it forward? Is there anything that's like absolutely like standstill blocked on that issue?
So it's just covering, well, one of the main thing was the hold label, and that I think that needs like a bigger discussion, because I thought during the planning meeting that we agreed to have a hold label, but Karen brought up a good point with that maybe hold is not really necessary for every PR that's created to the dev branch. So I just need a feedback from people here. And if you need some time to think about it, you can think about it and comment on the issue later. So.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely take some time to get a closer understanding on the issue and leave some feedback there, and leave it in stone. Cool. All right. So moving on, Brad brought up earlier on the call, and I wanted to capture this for the recording, was about the time zone changes in the US. So for context, the US recently, I think we sprung ahead. We fell back in the fall. We lost an hour in the fall. And a lot of our international or APAC meetings deal with UTC timing. So when the US does a time change or a daylight savings time change, ultimately doesn't really get reflected in the UTC time. Why this is complex, as opposed to saying, okay, well, it was 8 o'clock, in previous days, and now it's going to be 9 o'clock, or it's going to be 7 o'clock, whatever your standard local time is. What makes this challenging is for our APAC meeting, for example, when the time shifted, it actually went into the lunchtime of some of our Korean contributors. So they're saying that, we don't mind, we don't mind it moving and jumping an hour earlier as we, didn't do anything, if you will, and leaving it at that UTC time. So I don't have a great answer, but I wanted to bring that up here. And, I look for folks like Kohei. I see you're on the call from, the other side of the pond. If there's any other input there as far as how we can address and align those meeting times.
I just don't like the daylight saving thing.
None of us do.
So I actually have a question. Tim, do you have daylight savings time in the UK, or is it just a North American thing?
Yeah, it confuses Microsoft a lot because they think that we have Greenwich Mean Time. We have Greenwich Mean Time in the
GMT?
winter. That's which we are now, which is like kind of the predecessor of UTC, and then we use British summertime in the summer, and then the techies use UTC all year round, or set their computers to think they're in Iceland.
Yeah, so GMT is typically the same as UTC, but during summertime it's different, right?
Oh, no. So GMT is always the same as UTC, and that's the time zone that we use in the winter. And BST is a time zone that comes into existence in the summer. And it's an hour ahead.
BST. Oh, okay.
Yeah, British summertime. No, it's not simple.
It's genuinely confusing.
Basically, in Europe, it's still common for us to have like daylight saving time also, but I think it's come like 1 week earlier than the folks in the Europe. I mean, like in the North America.
Yeah.
And so to make this concrete, we sent out calendar meeting invites. And so I looked at my calendar and it said it was at the same time it was before the fall back. But, you know, the meeting says 1500 UTC, and that's the source of truth. And I showed up to my own meeting an hour late, and it was awkward. So I guess I could manually. So the calendar notices caused some grief too, I guess, Jim.
Right. And so there is the ability for us to set the calendar to UTC, which might ultimately be the easiest outcome here. I'm looking coordinated universal time. So we could set it to that where it stays without being impacted by daylight savings time. Now that I think about that, that probably is going to be the best option. Just folks need to be aware that calendar might jump up or jump down below, you know, depending on what time zone you're living in, what changes happen. I believe that's how our APAC meeting is set now, just to the coordinated universal time, or UTC.
I think that would work because we all check our calendars, and so, you know, I think we have plenty of time for the 1 or 2 times a year it moves.
Cool. Yeah, and I strong +1 that. So I'll take the action item to switch over our calendars that aren't already to UTC with the general understanding that if they jump before or after daylight savings times, we know what the source of truth is. And then also the other question that would come up potentially is for the monthly localization meeting, I believe like the documentation, the community group has American Pacific time listed in there for a specific time and date that hasn't been changed or auto updated, when that's going to also shift as well. So UTC fixes the problem for APAC residents, which is great, but we might need to consider a way to maintain all of the United States and, you know, the Northern American time zoned locations, you know, SIG community documentation, the release notes.
Yeah, the other thing that's actually coming to mind too is for countries that are shifting around time zones because of daylight savings time, if this meeting stays consistent in time and space, but none of the other meetings we might have around it stay consistent in time and space, there is a scenario in which this meeting could suddenly, for 2 or 3 weeks, overlap other meetings, other standing meetings that we have, because those meetings have shifted, but this one hasn't. So there's this part of me that is actually thinking, do we need to talk to the entire Kubernetes project and say, we need to consistently be on UTC? At the same time, we have a very strong standing contingent population that is in Asian time zones and in European time zones. And that is due to the nature of us maintaining localizations and Tim. Whereas I don't know if that's as much a concern for other SIGs. They have kind of transient people coming and going from like very far flung time zones from North America. So they may not see the same level of concern as we do. Sorry for that breakdown.
And they may be saying, hey, our stuff is not broken. Why do you want to fix it?
So
Well, it's not broken for them.
That's what I'm saying. They may say, what are you doing? We're happy. We were happy the way we were, Celeste. What are you doing?
this definitely predates myself, but I believe that the concept here is that the Tuesday regular meeting is in Pacific time that has the UTC time listed, but it's going to be consistently for the North American contributors for Kubernetes. And the need arose for the APAC meeting to exist. So we did the once a month localization or APAC meeting. And then we added on the localization efforts that Irving and Brad are leading once a month as well. It almost might, and this is kind of a wild concept of doing both at the same time, but it almost might make sense to leave the weekly Tuesday meeting a specific time zoned meeting throughout, consistently always in Pacific, Northern American time. Mm-hmm. And any of the localization APAC considering meetings such as our monthly APAC contributors meeting, our monthly localization meeting, maybe those get locked into UTC to accommodate more of the audience that generally attend those meetings.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Maybe we give it a try.
I just want to show up to a localization meeting on time.
Cool. Irving, Brad, could you take the action item once I switch it over to UTC to announcing it to the team saying that we figured this out, it's going to be UTC, and I'll also boost that in SIG Docs saying, look, the weekly Pacific time Tuesday meeting for the Northern American folks is not changing, but the APAC specific meetings will.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can take the action item for my part. Happy to.
Cool. So I'll switch the calendar to UTC.
Nice.
APAC events. Cool. And I'll take care of that after this meeting here. And we have about 3 minutes left. I see there's 2 more things from Celeste and Kohei. I want to be respectful of your time. Do we think we can cram that in here, or do you want to push that over to 2 weeks from now?
I can wait for 2 weeks from now, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess one thing that I will say though, in the quick intervening time period, we do have a recommendation pushed in for changing the term master to control plane in the context of nodes. So that is officially a thing that you will see approvals and held PRs and the like start going through on. Something I would like to bring to the attention of the localizations is we actually have 2 working group naming tagged issues in relation to localizations still using master quite broadly. And the 2 that were of the most concern were Japanese and German. And as a working group, we are not sure how to deal
Japanese.
with that. Hello. So you have a recommendation, and I don't know what the best way for you to implement that recommendation is, but yeah, that's the short update. We'll talk a little bit more later about the crunchy updates.
So Celeste, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I can quickly provide you about the status of this pull request if you'd like.
Sure.
Yeah, so basically we are keeping track in our milestone. So our changes in the localization is basically on our milestones. So that's why we're behind. So it is kind of like on purpose, but at the same time, if you think it's urgent and you should change it, we're totally welcome. I mean, any types of pull requests that is urgent. So I think it's up to you.
Yeah. Priority not urgent is how I would put it. Like don't get gray hairs, but don't let it sit forever.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Okay. So yeah, the next topic is kind of related to that. So yeah.
Cool. Do you want to take that topic in a minute here, Kohei?
Oh, so yeah, as it's written here, so Japanese first work of 1.18 has finally been merged. So it's only the first work, and we have a bunch of diffs to modify, and yeah, Korean team has a really big team, and yeah, we're actually facing difficulties in hiring active contributors in Japanese, and I think other languages have some kind of difficulties too. So yeah, it's just an update. I'm not really seeking for help here, but yeah, it's just an update, and because of that, we are way ahead of the upstream right now. I mean, no, way behind. So yeah, that's even why it's kind of taking time to merge. I mean, deal with that master thing. Yeah, which is kind of unfortunate. Yeah.
Cool. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And feel free, like I was mentioning earlier, if you need to use like the SIG Docs Slack channel to advertise looking for contributors or contribex, or I know that there's regular office hours and new Kubernetes contributors and users. Potentially there's a recruiting opportunity there that maybe they don't know that exists or that opportunity is out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. We're at time, so we will punt the rest of the agenda for the next meeting. Next meeting will be a Kubernetes social hour, and I look forward to seeing y'all there.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Celeste. So does master node now become control node?
I believe it becomes control plane node.
Yeah,
Control
it's control
plane.
plane.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. That's very helpful to know.
Yeah, I mean, read the recommendation. Aaron Kirkenberger wrote it, and he did a really, really great job with our kind of pilot recommendation. And very, very in short notice, blacklist, whitelist will have a recommendation up for PR as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Have a good
Awesome
one,
work.
guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.